Okay, hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about language as a system. When we say language, the acquisition process, how we acquire the language, how language comes to us, we never think on these terms. It comes to us so naturally that we take it for granted. But it's a very beautiful, complex phenomenon. And, you know, so we are going to talk about language as a system today. But before we talk about language as a system, let us try to understand what is language itself. So many scholars have tried to explain language as a phenomena, social phenomena, as a human phenomena. But we'll talk about a few important perspectives, like Edward Sapir, who says language is a purely human and non-instinctive method of communication by means of voluntarily produced symbols. Now, we need to understand these two very crucial words in this statement: purely human. This is one, and number two, voluntarily produced symbols. So, Sapir considers language to be purely human, and the noises that we make are, voluntary. We make voluntarily these noises, and we arrange these noises into certain strings which give us certain meaning, and then they are further combined at different levels and we socialize, interact and communicate. The other statement by Bloch and Trager in 1942, they say language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols by means of which a social group cooperates. Now, a new word now introduced here, arbitrary. We'll come to it later. But again, vocal symbols voluntarily produced, but these symbols are arbitrary in nature. And he also emphasizes, they also emphasize on the social aspect of it, that we need language to socialize, interact, and communicate, share. Then R.A. Hall, he says, language is the institution whereby humans communicate and interact with each other by means of habitually used oral auditory symbols. So everyone is talking about vocal symbol, auditory symbol, oral auditory symbol. But another important perspective added in this statement is the institution, the word institution. And when we say institution, he is emphasizing on social function of language, language which is socially, culturally rooted. Then we have Chomsky perspective, and he says language is a set of sentences, each finite in length and constructed out of finite set of elements. If you look at the total number of sounds in a language, they are limited. For example, in English we have 20 vowels and 24 consonants, 44 sounds. But can we actually count the number of words that we have in English, or can we actually count the number of sentences we have produced so far in English? So look at the, you know, infinite creativity of the phenomena called language, English language for that matter, here, that with limited set of sounds, we are able to create unlimited number of words. We keep on adding new words every time, right? So Chomsky perspective gives us a structural dependency phenomena in language, that language is structurally dependent, rule governed, and it allows us to create infinite number of utterances and words with finite set of linguistic elements available in the language. A very important perspective with which the modern linguistic discussions began by Saussure, who said language is a system of contrasts and equivalence, right? Uh, so, out of all these perspectives, what can we deduct? Right? What can we deduct out of all these perspectives? First thing that we understand is language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols. When we say vocal symbols, that means we are talking about noises, the sounds that we produce, right? These sounds individually do not carry any meaning. They don't have any meaning, but they are the minimal units combined together to create larger units and then meaningful units out of it. Then the second deduction that we can make out of it is that sounds are produced and received in oral auditory channel, oral and auditory, the reception. So, we have oral and auditory channels, and these sounds are produced and received in this channel. Another deduction that we can make out of it is that these vocal symbols, which are units of sound, are discrete and distinguishable. So, each sound that a language has is distinct and unique, and they contrast with each other. And because they contrast with each other, this is the reason why we are able to find the word boundaries, right? Where one word ends, where one chunk of this meaningful string ends and the other begins. Each of these sounds are unique, discrete in nature, and we can identify them. They are in contrast and opposition, like p and b for that matter, k and g, right? S and ch. So these sounds are separate, independent, distinguishable, and discrete. Then we can deduct out of all these perspectives that the sounds of a language combine and organize into meaningful strings. Individually, these sounds don't have any meaning. K doesn't mean anything for that matter, or p doesn't mean anything for that matter, right? So, when we say a word like cow, right, how you spell it, how you write it, C-O-W, 3 letters, but sound is K, right, A and O. So, K, A and O, cow. Now, K individually doesn't mean anything, right? A individually doesn't mean anything, and U individually doesn't mean anything. But they together in a particular combination create a string which has some meaning, and it refers to an animal, right? We have mental images of that animal, and we can relate to that mental image of a cow. So, when we say cow, it triggers an image, and we get some correlation with this sound called this string of sound called cow and an objective reality that is called an animal, and we can relate the two. So, this is how they create meaning out of it. And then such constructions continue, this combination continues at high levels. So, meaning strings of meaning in words, then these words are combined into phrases, then these phrases are combined into clauses, sentences, and then multiple sentences combined into paragraphs, whole discourse, right? Uh, Another set of deductions that we continue making out of it is that it has communication functions. Of course, it has communication functions, it has social functions, right? So, language has social function, and language is the best endowment to a human being, right? Can you imagine a situation like we have mobile phones, we have watch, I am wearing a watch here, a pen or shirt or my car or any worldly things, material things that you have, commodities that you have. So, let us imagine that language is also, and it is hypothetical. So, let us imagine that language is also such kind of commodity that we have, uh, you know, and we use. So all other commodities and things, material possessions that we have, like money or gold or things, can be taken away. So let us imagine a situation where your language can be taken away. So one fine night you sleep, and then somehow someone steals your language. You are robbed of your language. Just let us imagine, which is not possible in reality, but let us imagine that you can be stolen. This can be stolen from you out of you. What will happen? How do we react to it? This is hypothetical situation. How do you react? Can we imagine our life even a single day without language? That is the significance of language in our life, right? That is the centrality of language in our everyday interaction. You can't imagine a single day without language. It comes to us so naturally that we take it for granted. But it has a very crucial social function. The social configuration, social networks, are strengthened and carried out and established in terms of linguistic interactions, patterns of interactions, right? So we'll talk about all these things in late classes, but today it has definitely social function. It is purely human because language is the best endowment that we have, right? It is called an institution, keeping in mind the fact that language that is used by a particular society is part of that society's culture. So languages are culturally rooted, socially rooted, and they reflect the structures of a language. A particular language reflects structure of that society, right? Configuration of that society. The way you interact, the way you greet, the way you meet and socialize, all these patterns. So the social elements, cultural elements are, you know, embedded and implicitly there when we speak any particular language. So language is socially uh, rooted, culturally rooted. You cannot take culture out of a language or language out of a culture. So they have a symbiotic relationship. And post Chomsky, era, now we all know that language is structure dependent, and it's a beautiful faculty of human mind. So this is language for you. But how all these discussions start? If you want to understand these concepts in modern linguistic debates and discourses, we cannot ignore Ferdinand de Saussure, right? His lifespan 1857 to 1913. He was a Swiss scholar of Sanskrit, and incidentally, he was assigned a task to teach linguistics. He taught linguistics, and by the way, he did not write the book. But after his death in 1913, after 3 years, based on his class lectures, his students created this book posthumously, and that is called A Course in General Linguistics, which was published in 1916. And that became the reference point for discussion in these terms in modern linguistics. And he is also considered as father of modern linguistics. Uh, and perhaps that's the phase where we refer to a structuralism, where language was considered structure dependent, rule governed phenomena. So he talked in terms of sign, signifier, and signified. So cow, a vocal symbol, three vocal symbols, ka, a, u, and they signify a particular animal. These sounds in a string trigger a mental image. But then arbitrary, if you remember the word we talked about in the beginning, arbitrary, the relationship between signifier, like cow, the word, and signified, the animal it refers or represents in our mental images, there is no direct relationship between these two. So, signifier and signified, cow as a word and cow as an animal, they do not have corresponding relationship. So, arbitrary, right? So, this is arbitrary relationship. There is no one-to-one relationship. Why cow is a cow? Why pen is a pen? Watch is a watch? No idea. This is how you name. And when you name, then the same mental image is triggered in the speaker's mind as well as the listener's mind. This relationship is arbitrary, signifier and signified. He said meaning is fixed and the structure, and there is a structure followed by language. She introduced concepts of binary oppositions in language like signifier and signified, lang and parole, synchrony and diachrony, paradigm and syntagm. So, we will talk about all this in future videos, but Ferdinand de Saussure is the reference point for discussion on modern linguistics and also understanding language as a phenomena, a structural phenomena, right? How language has a structure and is rule governed, and how it represents the objective reality, right? So, this is the reference point in modern linguistics. So language as a system, right, uh, began with Saussure and also carried forward by Mulder and Harvey. They published an article in 1975. The reference is there in the slide, you can see, right? And their idea of language as a system has in you know in its fundamental belief, they talk about functions, social functions of language, because Mulder talked about system of semiotics, you know, and from there it is derived language as a system, right? This idea that language is a structure, language is a structure and a definite system also owes to the American structuralism, where they talk in terms of building blocks of a language and levels of representation. And so, what are the levels? What are the building blocks? Sounds, right? Sounds are the minimal units of language. Then these sounds are arranged in a particular string, in a particular combination to give certain meaning. So, then we reach another level where these sounds are combined and called words. Then these words are combined into utterances and sentences, right? So, phonology, the minimal unit of language called sounds, where we study sounds. Then the second level is morphology, where the sounds are arranged in a particular meaningful combination. Then we reach the level of syntax, third level, where these meaningful units called words are arranged in a particular combination, right, governed by certain rules of the language to give you sentences. Then semantics, it talks about meaning, right, and how meaning is derived out of these structures. So, first three levels, phonology, morphology, syntax, they refer to structure. The two levels, semantics, and then finally pragmatics, the way we understand these utterances and sentences in a real world situation, pragmatics. So, they talk in terms of these 5 levels of representation, and they are the building blocks of a language. Now, you can understand language in terms of human anatomy. Let us imagine human anatomy where we have multiple systems. So, human anatomy is a single system, right? And then within this single system, we have multiple systems like our nervous system for that matter, digestive system for that matter, kidney functions and all other organs and functions they have. So they do not have, they are not independent. All this nervous system is not independent. Digestive system is not independent, right? Heart functions, but not independently. Kidney functions, but not independently. So human anatomy, when you say, is a system. If you believe that human anatomy is a system, then it is made of multiple subsystems like nervous system, like digestive system, and so on. But it is interesting to note that these systems are not independent systems. These systems are interdependent systems, right? And when we are healthy and hearty, and when we are functioning, that means entire system is functioning. And how it is functioning? These systems are, all the subsystems in the human anatomy are in symbiotic relationship. They are interdependent and they function interdependently and constituting the whole human anatomy as a single system. Exactly in the similar analogy, we can understand language. So, language has system of sounds. Language has system and rules of combining these sounds into words. Language has a system of combining these words into larger strings and chunks called utterances or sentences. Then each of these systems are the system within their own right, right? Like, for example, sound system of a language. It is a whole system within its own right, because there are certain restrictions put on combining these sounds in a particular manner. Cow, ka, a, u. But can we say, let's say, if you go by spelling C or W, can we say W O C, C W O, O W C? So there are certain restrictions, right? And then what it represents in the objective world, in objective reality. So sound system of a language is a complete system in itself. Then we come to meaningful chunks, how they are combined together. So they are called morphemes, right? The meaningful unit. If we say sound, each individual sound doesn't carry any meaning. But like, for example, past forming morphemes like suffixes like ed, kill a verb, and we attach ed morpheme, it becomes killed past tense, right? So morphology, or the how the words are formed, so the entire word formation processes, how the verbs are inflected, right? How new words are formed, what are the restrictions applied on them, how meanings are derived. So morphology in itself is a system, it's in its own right, right? Sentences or syntax, right? Uh, so syntax in itself is a whole system, rule governed, right? So we can say that based on our human anatomy analogy, we can say that language is also a complete system of multiple smaller subsystems. So system within system, right? So language is considered as a system primarily because it is made of linguistic units or components that are interdependent of each other. So they're not independent, right? Uh, Language has a smaller units working within a whole system like human anatomy we just talked about, and it becomes a system of multiple subsystems like morphology, phonology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, lexicology. So these are all subsystems. It is different thing that all these subsystems are system within their own right, but they all together interdependently work to give you the phenomena called language, right? It consists of interdependent systems that only become fully meaningful when they are combined. Imagine if any deficiency in any of the systems in our anatomy, right? We are sick, we are ill, the system does not function properly. So, all these subsystems of a language are interdependent, symbiotic, and they function with perfect harmony, right? Then only you get a language as a solid single system. Okay, each of these subsystems contains an organized network of elements in its own right that work together to serve a purpose and accomplish an objective called communication or interaction or socialization, right? So we have talked about all these things. Phonology, for that matter, we just talked that it's all about the sounds of a language, their nature, their characteristics, the restrictions on combinations, right? Sounds individually don't mean anything, but you know the rules that govern putting these sounds in particular string, what are the restrictions, the properties of these sounds, place of articulation of these sounds, manner of articulation of these sounds. So these are all part of phonology as a subsystem. Then morphology, the rules for word formation, also has its own subsystem of morphemes, and morphology studies how words are constructed from morphemes, units of meaning, small units of meaning. So it is a system in its own right, right? Then lexicology, right? Part of morphology. Syntax, the combination of these words or meaningful units into larger units called sentence, right? So rules for word order and arrangements in a structure, particular structure, right? Uh, then semantics, very crucial thing, the meaning part of the strings or these smaller structures. So it has a subsystem of its own based on vocabulary and word localization. Semantics is all about the meaning that are expressed through words and syntax. Always remember meaning of a particular. We'll talk in pragmatics when we talk about pragmatics. The total meaning of a sentence is not meaning of a sentence is not total sum of the individual words, meaning of individual words. So pragmatics talks about how you interpret these meanings, combination of these meanings in a particular structure in a real world situation, right? And it becomes visible in terms of metaphors and the idioms that we use in a particular culture, because metaphors and idioms are culturally sensitive, and you know we all uh, if you are not familiar with the culture, if you are not familiar with the society and the context in which it is being used, you won't be able to derive meaning out of it, because the meaning of a sentence is not the total sum of meaning of individual words, right? A very famous sentence by Chomsky, like, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It's a syntactic structure, it's a sentence. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. So each of the words in this particular sentence has some meaning. It's colorless has a meaning, something without color. Green, name of a color, and we all understand what is green. Then ideas, we all know, we all understand ideas as a word and the meaning it correlates with. Sleep, a verb, furiously, an adverb. So colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It's whole sentence, right? What does it mean? So you have individual meanings, but how it is interpreted? Can we consider it grammatical? Can we consider it to be a grammatical sentence in in a language called, let's say, English? Can we take it uh, as a sentence? What is the meaning of the sentence? How do we interpret it? Right? Because something green cannot be colorless, right? And then idea, there is no point talking about idea in terms of colors, whether it is colorless or green, right? Meaningless. Then sleep verb, it's a plus animate word. Only living beings sleep, non-living beings, for them it's no use. And then furiously, this adverb cannot go with sleep, because how can we be furious while sleeping, right? So pragmatics is all about how we interpret the meaning out of a meaningful structure, right? How we interpret the meaning. Like, for example, somebody visits you and you say, why don't you sit? Now when you say, why don't you sit, are you asking a question? Because if you look at the structure of this sentence, it looks like an interrogative sentence. Why don't you sleep? Why don't you sit? But is it really a question, or is it an offer, right? So we know that it is an offer. A guest who visits you and you offer that, why don't you sit? That means you are offering a seat to the person, right? How do you understand these structures and meaning? How do you derive meaning out of it in the real world situation, right? Uh, and for example, in all discourse markers and other elements of the language, their roles and their functions in a sentence, and how we use that particular structure or word in a particular social context. So this is what pragmatics is all about. So pragmatic talks about rules of language use, how you use it, right? So one, the language or the linguistic element or linguistic unit, its own linguistic function, and then how these units are used in a particular context to get you, the communicative function of it. That is what pragmatics talks about. So pragmatic looks at how language is used in a context and how meaning can vary or be revealed or concealed according to a speaker's situation, right? So now we all understand language as a system. It's a system, beautiful. I mean, Chomsky refers to language as, you know uh, a structural dependent system where these structures can be investigated and explained with mathematically algorithmic precision, right? So it's a structure, it's a system, complete beautiful system. And then this system has multiple subsystems, like sound pattern of a language, sound system of sounds. So that is called phonology. It is a complete unit in itself, complete system in itself. Then morphology, right? The word formation processes, how words are created, uh, you know, and then putting them into sentence, larger chunk, larger structure, which is called syntax. It is a complete system within itself. Then how we derive meaning out of these structures, and that is called semantics, is complete system in itself. And then how these meanings are interpreted in a real world situation, we can call pragmatics. So isn't it beautiful to see that phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics and pragmatics, these five subsystems together function and in an interdependent way, right? to give us language as a complete system. So we understand today that language is a system. It has multiple subsystems. All these subsystems together function, right, uh, and in an interdependent fashion to give us language a complete system.